At a quiet roadside motel in Arizona, the man paused at the reception desk, rubbing his hands together to fight off the cold that had settled deep into his bones after hours of driving through snow-covered mountains. The storm outside showed no mercy. Wind howled, ice cracked beneath tires, and visibility was almost gone. The receptionist was distracted, paperwork scattered across the counter, and the lobby felt unusually empty. As the man turned slightly, ready to head to his room, something beyond the glass doors caught his attention, movement that didn't belong in weather like this. Outside, near the edge of the parking lot, stood a young Apache child. The boy's clothes were thin, his hair dusted with snow, his small body trembling uncontrollably. He looked no older than 8 or 9, his face pale and eyes heavy with exhaustion and hunger. Each step he took seemed forced, as if his legs might give out at any moment. Cars passed on the highway without slowing, headlights briefly illuminating him before disappearing into the storm. No one else seemed to notice. In that moment, the man felt a sharp pull in his chest, an instinct stronger than fear or hesitation. Without stopping to think about consequences or explanations, he pushed the door open and stepped into the freezing air. The boy flinched at first, unsure whether to run or collapse. The man knelt down slowly, keeping his voice calm and gentle, using simple words and gestures to show he meant no harm. The child's lips were cracked from dehydration, his hands numb and red. When the man offered his jacket, the boy hesitated, then accepted it with shaking fingers. It was clear he hadn't eaten properly in days, maybe longer. Inside the motel, warmth wrapped around them instantly. The man guided the child to a chair, asked the receptionist for hot water and food, and ignored the curious looks that followed. He bought soup, bread, and milk, watching closely as the boy ate, slowly at first, then with quiet desperation. Every spoonful seemed to bring a little life back into him. The man offered clean clothes and a blanket, and the boy clutched them as if afraid they might disappear. There were no questions yet, no pressure to explain what couldn't be easily said. Later that evening, the storm worsened. Snow piled against the windows, and the wind screamed through the darkness. In the small motel room, the child sat on the bed, wrapped tightly in blankets, finally warm and safe. The man sat nearby, giving space but staying close enough to reassure him. He didn't know the boy's name, his family, or how he ended up alone in such dangerous conditions. But one thing was certain, sending him back outside was not an option. Some choices didn't require permission. They required courage. As the night grew quieter, something unspoken settled between them. The child's breathing slowed, his tense shoulders relaxed, and exhaustion finally claimed him. Watching the boy sleep, the man felt a deep sense of responsibility he hadn't expected. This wasn't about charity or heroism. It was about doing what was right when no one else was watching. In the middle of a brutal storm, inside a forgotten roadside motel, a silent bond formed. One built on trust, survival, and a single act of humanity that would soon change far more than either of them realized. 4 days later, the storm that had trapped the mountains in silence finally loosened its grip. Pale sunlight slipped through thinning clouds, reflecting off endless sheets of white snow. Inside the small motel room, the air felt calmer, almost hopeful. The man had just finished preparing a simple breakfast when a sudden knock echoed through the hallway. Firm, urgent, and filled with emotion. It wasn't the casual knock of a guest or staff member. It carried weight, as if someone on the other side had been holding their breath for far too long. When the door opened, 3 Apache women stood in the narrow hallway, their clothes worn, faces pale from exhaustion, and eyes heavy with sleepless nights. Snow clung to their boots, and their hair was tied back hurriedly, as though they had rushed without stopping. Fear and hope battled across their expressions. They spoke softly at first, asking about a child, a young boy who had gone missing days earlier during the storm. Their voices trembled, not from the cold alone, but from the possibility that they might finally be too late. The man stepped aside, unsure of what to say, and in that moment the child appeared from behind him. Time seemed to stop. The women froze, disbelief washing over their faces before recognition struck. One of them covered her mouth, another fell to her knees, and tears streamed freely without shame. They rushed forward, embracing the boy tightly, as if afraid he might vanish again. Their cries filled the hallway, relief, gratitude, and pain pouring out all at once after days of relentless searching. They explained how the child had wandered away during the worst night of the storm, confusion and fear guiding his steps into the mountains. Search efforts had nearly failed as roads closed and temperatures dropped dangerously low. Every hour without news felt heavier than the last. Yet they refused to stop, walking miles through snow, asking strangers, praying at every stop. Finding him alive felt nothing short of a miracle. The man listened quietly, realizing how close the story had come to ending in tragedy. There was no talk of rewards or recognition. Instead, the women thanked him with trembling voices and bowed heads, their gratitude raw and sincere. They saw not a stranger, but a protector, someone who had chosen compassion over convenience. The child clung briefly to the man's hand before being guided back into his family's arms, his eyes showing both trust and sadness at the separation. That brief connection, formed in silence and survival, would never truly disappear as they prepared to leave. The hallway felt different, lighter, yet emotional. The man watched them walk away, knowing he had played a small but crucial role in a much larger story. What began as a simple decision at a reception desk had grown into something far greater. It proved that kindness needs no language, no borders, and no recognition. Sometimes, a single human choice is enough to change lives forever.